All right, we're going to talk a little bit about plumbing today. A couple things on plumbing. First of all, when we're talking about plumbing, we're talking about installing and repairing water pipes and fixtures. This could include things that are both freshwater systems and drain systems as well. So anything that's going to be dealing with water, we're going to be talking about involving plumbing. There's really kind of two terms we use. We use pipe and we use fittings, and then we also have tubing. Pipe is stuff that is going to be rigid, so it's not going to be flexible at all. So it's going to be pretty straight. You're not going to be able to bend, flex it, move it around. Any of the fittings are the things that are used to connect those pieces together, or to connect those pipes to other objects, to make bends, turns, tees, whatever it is that we're trying to do. We're going to talk about that. We have some things on some of the standard fittings at the end of this PowerPoint. We'll go a little bit more in depth with those. And the other term that we use is tubing. In this unit and what we're talking about as far as tubing, it's pipe that is flexible enough to bend. So even though we might be able to slightly bend some of the PVC that we have, the copper tubing that we use, we're really referring to those things as pipe, and tubing would be things that we could bend. So that black flexible tubing that we use for like irrigation systems, sprinklers, like micro sprinklers, drip line irrigations, that's what we're referring to as tubing. So it's flexible, it's designed to be bent and turned around. So as I mentioned, we have really two different styles of water systems. We either have a water supply system, which is going to be carrying fresh water from our source, from a well, into a fixture. So the faucet in the house, a laundry machine, your bathtub, the sink, any of those things is going to be fresh water that's going to be coming in. That's the supply system. That stuff is going to be pressurized. It's going to have water in it all the time as long as it's working right. The drain waste vent system is all the stuff where the water is going to leave. So the stuff that's actually going to go carry that water into the sewer. So the stuff that goes down into your sink, taking that stuff away. So if you're in the city, it's going to take that into the sewage system there. If you're out in the country, you have a septic system, it's going to go into those things. So taking the water away is the drain waste vent system. We're really not going to focus too much on that. Most of this unit is going to be more based on the water supply system. That's kind of what we're dealing with. But we'll have a little bit that we'll talk about as far as drain waste system goes. There are some basic tools that we need to use. Some of these things we may use, but they're depends on what we have in the shop. First one that you can kind of see here, this is called a bench yoke vise. This is designed specifically to actually clamp in pipes. If you notice on the edge here, we actually have the vise grips are actually angled, so that way it doesn't crush the pipe. We do not want to put these pipes into a machinist vise. We don't want to put them into a wood vise because they're not going to get secured and the pipes can smash. Maybe not necessarily the steel ones like you see here, but definitely PVC or copper. Very, very malleable. You can actually crush those things, break them, and then they're not going to work right. So using a pipe vise is going to help. A bench yoke vise is one of them. A chain vise is another. This is an example of a chain vise. So the chain basically wraps up and over, and there's little notches on that chain, and you adjust this lever right here, and then it's going to tighten around that pipe. It's going to secure that. So it's going to hold round pipes better than any kind of machinist vise, and it's not going to crush and collapse them. Some of the things we use to tighten things up is a chain wrench. Kind of works the same way that the chain vise does, where you slip that stuff in, and then this is going to grab onto the pipe, or a pipe wrench right here. Otherwise, probably most known to a lot of people as a monkey wrench. I'm kind of in the way. here's a where is it at? I can't get my fingers to work. That's the pipe vise. Let me get out of the way. Or pipe wrench, I should say. This thing we can adjust right here. We can adjust it for different size pipes. They're actually designed to go in one direction and then loosen in the other direction. So you don't have to loosen it up, and it can tighten and hold that pipe. The chain vise works kind of in the same way as well. Although we don't have any of these in our shop, we're going to use the pipe wrench right there. Some other stuff that we're going to use, hacksaws for cutting pipe. That's one way that we can cut pipe. We got files to clean up any burrs. We have a pipe cutter right here. This thing has two little bearings on it and then a little cutting tip You essentially just tighten this thing down a little bit at a time. You go around the pipe, move it around, turn it a little bit more, and it will eventually cut. There's a video that's going to explain how to actually use that. There are reamers that we have that can go inside of the pipe that can kind of clear out any burrs or any restrictions that are created. And then we also have a tubing cutter. This is very similar to the pipe cutter in the way that it works and operates, but this is for smaller pipe. We predominantly use this for our copper pipe, where we use this pipe cutter for our steel pipe. But they work in pretty much the same way. This is just for a heavier gauge material, and this is for a lighter gauge material. We have a ratchet and die stock. This is a ratchet. This is the dies. You can see there's a whole bunch of them. For our unit, what we're going to be doing is 1/2 inch stuff. So we're going to need a 1/2 inch die. It works very similar to the taps that we've used in class, where it's going to cut threads, but it's going to cut it on the outside of a pipe. Again, there's a video that demonstrates how to do this. The other thing, we're not actually going to use this thing in class, but a flaring block is another common tool. They use this for like tubing. If you have like a refrigerator that has water coming in, a lot of times the best thing to use for that is actually a copper tubing that is flexible, so it will actually bend. And those ends, there's fittings, special fittings that go onto that. And this block right here actually just flares that out. So you put the pipe in, there's a tool that comes down and it makes it wider, so that way the fitting will seat up against it, and it creates a seal so that way you don't have leaks. A lot of times people will use kind of like a tubing, like a vinyl tubing or something on there, or like a PVC flexible tubing, and it eliminates the need for this, but copper really is the best thing. Although it's a little bit more expensive, that is kind of what's preferred. When we talk about pipe, there are tons of different styles of pipes or sizes of pipes. We identify pipe by its nominal size. That is really by name only. Okay, when we talk about nominal, just like we talked about wood, the nominal size of wood is not necessarily the actual size. That's usually based on the inside diameter. And we say nominal because it's not always going to be the exact diameter of the inside of a pipe. We use terms like ID for inside, OD for outside, and those things do kind of change depending on the thickness of the pipe that we're dealing with. So we have different thicknesses of pipe, and what actually changes when we change the thickness. So if we have like a scheduled 40 PVC versus a scheduled 80 is going to be a little bit thicker. The outside diameter doesn't change, the inside diameter is going to change on those things. In general, though, the inside diameter of a pipe, if it's a 1/2 inch pipe, the nominal size, or the most average size, will be 1/2 inch. But if we get thicker pipe, that inside diameter is going to actually change a little bit, because we want to be able to match fittings up. I don't want to have a fitting for every different size of pipe and then every thickness of a pipe. So because the fittings go on the outside, we actually will reduce the inside diameter a little bit. Some common sizes that we see on the farm: 1/4 inch, 3/8. You'll see a lot of those things, like I had mentioned, in your refrigerators coming in through tubing. We'll see a lot of 1/2 inch stuff that's typically coming up from like sprinkler systems. 3/4 inch stuff is typically going to be for things that are, coming into your house. You might see a lot of 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4. As we start getting up into these bigger pipes, this is where we start to see more of the farming stuff come in: 2, 2.5, 3, 4, 6 inch pipes. We typically don't have that a lot in our homes. Most of the time, 1.25 inch, 1.5 is pretty average for a home. Sometimes you might see some 2 inch. If you have a well coming right out of the well, it might be 2 inches, and then it will get reduced down to these other pipe sizes. We're just not needing that much water in our homes like we are on a farm. On a farm, we're trying to irrigate lots of acres of land. We need the bigger pipe sizes to be able to supply that water that is needed. Steel pipe can either be black or galvanized. Black is going to be a painted. Galvanized is going to be a material that's on top of the pipe or on the outside of the pipe, so that way it doesn't rust. The black paint will also help keep it from rusting, but galvanized coating sticks a little bit better than black pipe. They're essentially the same thing. We use them interchangeably. Most of the time we try to stick with galvanized pipe as opposed to the black pipe, but they're essentially the same thing. So the black pipe is painted black, little resistance to rusting. The galvanized pipe is coated with the zinc on the inside and the outside of the pipe. In some instances, you may not be able to use galvanized pipe for different various projects, things like that. We might need to choose different types of pipe. But if we're doing, things with, animals or homes, it's not a big deal. And what we're doing is going to be a sprinkler project. We don't have any issues with that with our project here. Galvanized pipe resists rust a lot longer than black pipe does. That's one of the reasons why we tend to go with this. It's typically a little bit more expensive, but it's worth the price for the longevity that you get with that system there. We're not going to talk about threading steel pipe. There's a video that's going to show and demonstrate how to actually do that. So make sure that you watch that video or you see in class what actually we are going to do, that process of how we thread steel pipe. Moving on to copper pipe and tubing, these things are kind of really the same thing. Although when we talk about tubing, we talk about it being flexible. When we talk about pipe, it's going to be stuff that is rigid. So we use those terms sometimes interchangeably. You can purchase this in two ways: that soft annealed form, which you can actually move, and then the rigid form, which is kind of what you see on the right-hand side of the screen right here. Okay, so like we said, in this unit, the soft form is tubing, the rigid form is pipe. That's just what we're identifying. But those terms can be used kind of interchangeably on copper pipe. There's a lot of good things to copper pipe, a lot of pros to it, okay? And a lot of times we will prefer copper over steel because it has a resistance to corrosion. So copper does not corrode like steel does. We don't get a rust that will form and eat away at the metal and then create holes. So because these are water supply lines, there is water that's running into them. There is a potential for a rust to form, and that rust can then corrode that pipe out. With copper, we don't get that. In fact, there is something that we have with copper that is called a patina that you get on it. And I'll give you a second to maybe think about some things that have a patina on them. Just again to give you an example a little bit, there are some famous things that I guarantee every single one of you knows that has copper on it and has that patina, which is like the rust of copper. Okay, some famous things, everybody knows about it. So if you got that in your head, just shout it out loud right now. Even though I can't hear you, shout it out. Okay, and if you don't know, and if you haven't guessed it by now, if you were thinking the Statue of Liberty, you are absolutely correct. Statue of Liberty actually is made of copper, and then that green look is the patina that you get on that copper. So that's that rust, but it doesn't eat away at it. It actually just forms a layer, kind of a little protective layer, and it prevents it from actually diving in and corroding the rest of that. So one good reason that we use copper is because of that resistance. It's lightweight, it's easy to handle, easy to work with. It's a lot easier to cut. You can actually just hold the pipe in your hand and use the tubing cutter and cut it. You don't even need a vise to be able to cut these things. So super easy to work with, super easy to handle. It can withstand freezing temperatures. Copper has a higher degree of expansion than steel does. If we have a steel pipe and it doesn't have anything securing it, nothing holding it in place, if water gets in and freezes, water is going to expand, and that expansion is going to bust pipes. And typically you see those at valves, things where there's very close tolerances, where you see pipes starting to freeze. So with copper pipe, there's a little bit more of an expansion before it breaks. And so that is another reason why we like to use copper. Some of the bad things to copper is that it's expensive. It has a very, very high initial cost, especially compared to other things. But a lot of times those pros outweigh that cost. And so we go with copper because it's just a little bit better overall. That expansion that we talked about, it's a really great thing for freezing. It's a really bad thing if we're putting it inside of a house and we have two walls and it needs to be exactly in between those two walls. Any kind of heating up or cooling down will cause it to expand lengthwise as well as around. And that could cause bending, deformities. It could break, crack the pipe, because now we're putting it in between, two walls that are going to be solid. And if we don't allow for that expansion and contraction, it could cause some issues. So sometimes that can become a bad thing. The other thing that we get is sometimes we get a bad taste. The taste will have like an acidic taste to that water there, which is not necessarily desirable. And then also that slightly acidic water will react with copper and leave the green stains in sinks and tubs. So if you're ever in, especially like an older home that has copper as the tubing that they've used or as the pipe, then you might see green rings around sinks and tubs. That's an indication that there's a little acidic water and copper mixing together, creating that patina. It's that green stuff, that patina that comes up. That'll also stain tubs and sinks. If they're not using copper, newer homes, newer constructions, there's other things that they typically tend to use more than this, so you don't really see those. That's typically an older home that did use copper within their system. We're going to talk about actually how to apply how to sweat copper pipe. That's going to be shown in the video. This is just a brief introduction, but we're going to kind of skip by that. The video is going to explain that a little bit more than we can do just talking about it here. There are lots of different types of plastic pipe that we use in irrigation. They are nice because they're cheap. They're even easier to handle than copper. They can handle a lot of different things, do a lot of different systems. And we talk about like irrigation systems. Those are predominantly done with plastic pipe. There are a couple different types of pipe that we can use for plastic pipe. Some of the things are polyethylene or a PE pipe, polyvinyl chloride, or commonly known as a PVC. Because most people have probably heard of PVC. And then we also have this ABS, the acrylonitrate butadiene styrene, which is really tough to say, which is why we just generally call it ABS. Each one of these things you probably have seen in some form or fashion. You just may not be aware of what is what. So when we talk about the polyethylene pipe, the PE pipe, this is a black flexible tubing. Normally it's black. It could come in other colors, browns. Typically you don't see them clear, although I have seen some for demonstration purposes. Most of the time they're going to be dark in color, so a black or a brown, so that way we don't get algae forming in. We use these for cold water lines only. No hot water can be run in these things. And we typically see them in like irrigation systems, okay? When we talk about flower beds, we talk about drip lines, we talk about micro sprinklers in agriculture. This is typically where we get them. You buy them in rolls like you can see up in here. There's little fittings that attach to those things, which are different from other fittings that we're going to use in our unit. And you can bend them. It is flexible, okay? You can bend them around. Obviously, it comes in a roll. You can straighten them out. You can bend them around like trees, around your flower beds. Very, very useful. Most people, they don't know that that's polyethylene pipe. Now you guys do. So that PE, that black flexible pipe, that's what we're talking about. We can do these things in direct burial installations or on the surface level. We can even attach it in like vineyards up high and have drip lines that are coming down onto that. Lots of uses, but this stuff is used a lot in agriculture. The PVC pipe is going to be that white pipe. Typically it's white. You can see it in gray, and typically if you see it in gray, that's going to be a scheduled 80 pipe, so it's going to be a little bit thicker pipe. It's going to resist any kind of freezing temperatures more than a scheduled 40 pipe is going to use. So you see them in white, you see them in gray. They use these things for cold water lines only. This is why you see them in irrigation systems. Most of the pipes that you have, if you've got like a lawn, yard, that's probably going to be a PVC pipe underneath there. We're not running hot water. We're not taking baths. We're not doing any of that stuff with it. PVC is nice because it's very, very easy to install. Very, very lightweight. It's cheap to do. The fittings are more expensive than the pipe. Okay? You can cut the stuff with any saw. Doesn't matter. You can cut it with, a coping saw, a back saw, a hacksaw. We have special little PVC cutters that we're going to use to do it because it gets it a little bit cleaner. But if you're in a pinch, you can cut it with just about anything. There is another one. PVC pipe is used with liquid cement. We will show you that in the video. Make sure you watch that video there. There's another type of PVC pipe. It's called a chlorinated polyvinyl chloride, or a CPVC pipe. These things are designated to be used with hot water. If you run hot water in a PVC pipe, it's going to just kind of melt and it's not going to hold its shape, where CPVC will. And so we have seen some of the CPVC pipe that's been used inside of homes to kind of take over some of the other copper pipes and stuff. That's not necessarily kind of the thing that we use. There's another one that's used, and I really need to add that into here. It's called PEX tubing. So it's kind of a flexible pipe. It's designed to be used for hot water and cold water. We call it a PEX tubing. It may be a variant of CPVC, but we do use that stuff. A lot of times in like trailers, we'll use PEX tubing. Different types of fittings that are going to be used with that stuff, different types of tooling that's going to be needed. But that's where a lot of newer homes, newer constructions, a lot of trailers are going to have PEX tubing in them to allow for that use of cold and hot water. The ABS pipe, typically we use these things for sewage, underground applications. So the tests that they've done on these things have shown that these things can last, over 50 years. So all the stuff that's underneath your sink, all the stuff that runs into your sewer system, most of the time that's going to be an ABS pipe. You know ABS pipe because of the black. Typically it's going to be a black color, and that's going to be all for your drain waste system. We apply it the same way no matter what we're doing, whether it's PVC, ABS. You apply them in the same way using PVC cement. Again, in the video, we're going to show you how we actually do that and how we glue that stuff together. ABS is nice. It's very lightweight, very easy to assemble, very easy to put together. Okay, and it has replaced cast iron. So if you're in an older home, you might have had cast iron for your drain waste vent system. Newer homes, newer construction, ABS is the thing. It's going to last a lot longer. It's going to hold up to any kind of rust, wear, tear a lot better than the cast iron pipe. One fun fact, there is actually a very, very popular children's toy that uses the ABS material in their toy, and that is Legos. If you think about Legos, that plastic that is made, it's actually made from ABS. So it's a very, very strong, very, very rigid pipe. If you've ever stepped on Legos, you know that those things are durable, so you can have some confidence in this pipe. But that's what they use for Legos. They melt it down. It's very hard to kind of reform it, remelt it, do other things. Once it's kind of formed, that's kind of where it's at, and it's going to maintain and hold its shape very well. They're all used the same thing. There are different types of glues depending on the pipe that you are putting together. But again, I'm just going to kind of skip through this because we're going to show that in a video. You guys can look at this, but this stuff is here. So you basically primer, glue, go through that. Some of the popular fittings that we see with these things to join the pipes could be predominant around, all of them, whether you're dealing with copper, whether you're dealing with PVC, whether you're dealing with steel. Some of them are a little bit more specific to the type of material that they're connecting, but they're all going to have the same basic components. So the first things that we see are elbows. Okay, these things are going to change the direction of the pipe. The most common ones that you see are 90s and 45s. Sometimes you can get some variants of those. Those are the two that you're going to see most common. You see them in copper, you see them in steel, and you see them in PVC. Some street elbows, these ones are maybe not as popular, but if you notice on these ones, you have one end that is going to be threaded on the outside and one end that's going to be threaded on the inside. We call this a male and female end. Okay, so when you have threads on these things, predominantly you see these a lot more in steel, although there are some that you can see for other types of material. This one is a little bit more predominant for steel, but I can't say that it's not true because you do see some for PVC, and I'm sure there's some for the copper as well. Anybody can make whatever they want, but predominantly you see these ones in steel. These ones are nice because you can put this one up if you have like close quarters. You can actually thread another pipe into there without having to use a nipple or a short piece of material, short piece of pipe to thread into those things. That's why we use them. It's still bending it at a 90 degree. It's just kind of a modified elbow there. We have T's, which are going to allow lines to be branched off of. So these things are going to be, a pipe that's ran through and then it comes in right here. This one's kind of a modified one. There's other stuff that's also on there, but essentially the T is just 3 entry points or 3 exits, however you want to look at that. They can be slipped with PVC. They could be threaded with steel. The PVC could be threaded. We can have them with copper as well. So you see these are very, very common. You see them all over the place. And it's shaped like the letter T. We have these couplers. These are going to join two pieces of pipe together. So if you're running like a long line or long distance, pipes typically are going to come in about a 10-foot distance if you're buying them from the hardware store. So if you're going to run something that's a little bit longer, you don't need to make a bend or anything. You're going to put these couplers. Could be slipped, could be threaded, PVC, copper, steel. You see them in all of them. We have these reducers here that are going to join different pipes of different diameters. So you can see that one size is wider, the other size is smaller. That is for the different sizes of pipe. This pipe is going to go on the inside here and the inside of that thing. Same piece here, inside there. This one might go from like 3/4 to a 1/2 inch pipe. So if you're changing the size of the pipe from like the well where you're coming to into your house, into your fittings, these reducers are going to help. If it's galvanized, this is kind of a special one. We call it a bell reducer because it kind of looks like a bell. But if it's copper, if it's PVC or any kind of, plastic pipe, it's just a reducer. A bushing is going to do the same thing. It's going to take the one size of pipe and fit it with another. The difference is this does it in a smaller distance. So kind of like the street elbows where it kind of eliminates the need for a nipple, and you can do that in close quarters. If we want to reduce the pipe size, we can use a bushing to do so. So smaller pipe, bigger pipe, just in a shorter distance. We have these unions, which are used to join pieces of pipe where you can't be turned. So sometimes we need to make a cut into a piece of pipe, maybe something that's in the ground, and we can't turn either end. We can put one of these things on. These are prominently done when we're trying to replace or repair equipment and we can't get into that pipe to make those adjustments. So we can use a union here, which will thread on or glue on to either end, and then the centerpiece actually tightens both of those together. That's like threaded. It tightens both of those together, and then it creates a seal there. So you see them in a lot of repair work, repair jobs. You'll see them. We have adapters. We can have male adapters and female adapters. The male adapters have threads on the outside. The female adapters have threads on the inside. And we're used to kind of change the end. So we might be changing it to a different type of material. We might be changing it, to, end or to go into something. These adapters are going to have that. You see these in copper. You see them in plastic plumbing. You don't typically see these in steel because steel, if we wanted like a male end like this, we would simply put threads on the outside of that steel. So we cut the steel pipe to length and we put threads. It eliminates the need for this. But we can't do that with copper and plastic, which is why you typically see these for them. You have caps, which are used to close off the end of a dead pipe. So if you have the end of a pipe, you can close it off. If you want to tap into that later, you can cut that off and then add any fitting that you want to. Sometimes we do that just for future stuff that people may want to do. It can be threaded. They can be basically soldered on with like this copper pipe or glued on if it's PVC. You see them in all of them. Caps are different than plugs. Plugs are used to close the opening of a pipe. You'll notice that the threads are going to be a male end. And we typically use these things when we need to have points of inspection or we need to kind of clean or flush out the lines. So plugs are going to be useful in that we can remove them versus caps, which they're typically not things that are going to be removed. You're going to have to cut those things off and then add in whatever fitting you want. These are designed to be removed and replaced so that way we can clean and inspect that pipe. Any short pieces that are under 12 inches of length are actually called a nipple. So you can buy these things from the store that are already pre-threaded, or if you have a die, you can actually thread these things yourself. Sometimes when they get really small, that's really tough to do. So we let the manufacturers make us a little piece that is an inch wide or an inch long, 2 inches long, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Those are standard lengths that these things come in. So if you need short pieces, you can just buy them already threaded. If you need anything longer, you're going to have to cut, buy the pipe, and do that. But nipples are pieces that are under 12 inches there. In the drain waste systems, we have these things called Ys. Why are they called a Y? They look like a Y. It's not spelt with the letter Y. It's actually WYES. And they are used in drain waste vent systems. If you ever have like your sink where you have the P trap that's kind of going down where the water kind of sits, there's actually a vent that goes up through your roof. That's where we really see a lot of these Ys. So you might have something where water drains down, but then it vents out the top. We go through the roof so that way we're not smelling any of the drain system, any of the sewage system. It's going to be going out through the top of the roof. So that's why you see on roofs, you see all those little pipes that are coming out. It's all basically coming from these Ys in our drain waste vent system. And that is kind of the general fittings that we have. So